Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome along to this fifth in our series of potato town hall meetings focusing on the pre-pack sector. My name is Jimmy Phillips. I'm from the communications team on potatoes here at AHDB, and I'm the event host. My job is to ask questions to the panel, which really is what this event is all about. Before we get into that, there's some housekeeping I need to run through with you. This session is being recorded. To ask a question to the panel, there's two main ways. You can use the session chat on the right-hand side of your screen, or you can click Ask to share audio and visual. That's a request to come up here on the virtual stage and put your question to the panel face-to-face. Please note that the only two ways we'll accept questions today. There is a direct messaging function on this platform, but it's not being monitored tonight. If anyone does want to come up on the platform and ask a question face-to-face, this can take a few seconds, so we'll just ask you to bear with us. Following the session, the meeting will stay open for a further 10 minutes. This might give you a chance to have a look at the AHDB Hub, where we've picked a few of our most relevant webinars from recent weeks. And there's also a chance to have a look in the reception area where there's information about the ballot itself and also what you get for your levy. If you don't have time today, you can go to ahdb.org.uk/potato levy at any time. And you might get a pop-up evaluation form. That's about the platform rather than this meeting. You'll be emailed an evaluation form after the event. On the panel today, we've got Nicholas, Alison and Rob. They're going to introduce themselves later. So also in the meeting, David, Amber and Claire from our KE team, they're on hand should any of the questions you ask require information from our technical programme of work. Also in the meeting, you've got me as the event host, Amanda and Sammy from the events team, and they're here if you've got any trouble with the platform in terms of audio or asking a question. And there's also Andy taking notes. The notes and the recording from this session should be on the website within the next few working days. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to Nicholas to introduce himself and the panel.
Thanks, Jimmy. So I'll start off and then I'll introduce Alison and Rob. So background to me, and I apologise for those who've already heard me say all this. Background to me is started in fruit and vegetables and potatoes. We built quite a large pre-packing business a long time ago in Essex, Lincolnshire and Kent. Built a public company out of that, food manufacturing, and I sold that in the 1990s. Farmed in Southern Africa, South America, Europe and the UK. So broad experience in farming. Took on the chair of the Organic Milk Suppliers Cooperative 18 years ago and built that particularly with exports into North America, China and Australasia. And then retired from that in April of last year, at which point I was asked by George Eustace if I would chair AHDB. Prior to that, in parallel, I'd for a long time been doing things like starting Food from Britain for the government and writing papers on issues like the future of food distribution in the southeast of England. So broad experience. When George asked me to chair AHDB, it was on the cusp of them issuing the results of the request for views. And obviously I was aware of the results of that request for views. It had taken 2 years to work its way through DEFRA, so that was a bit of an issue. But the main features were that at that point, 65% of levy payers wanted the continuation of levies, but there were two problems. One was levy payer engagement, and the other one was perceived cost of delivery. So that was the point of which I was really charged with coming in and bringing about some change. I have to say that on arrival, the first day of arrival was the lockdown on COVID. So everything has happened since then remotely, including Alison and me on the board and me and Rob and the management team. So it's been a really interesting period. And I've been actually, I mean, we'll come on to all the criticisms, I've no doubt, but I was actually very impressed by the quality of the people. I really am impressed by the quality of people and the way in which they coped with the lockdown and everything else. However, having said that, there are issues. There are issues that we have to address, and the town hall meetings are not just about potatoes, and they're not about just horticulture, the other area where there's a ballot. It's also across the whole remit. It's across beef and lamb and dairy and pork and cereals. So we're in the middle of that process, and it's sharpened obviously in potatoes because of the ballot. So now come back to what we've actually announced, and I'm talking generally before we come on to potatoes. We've announced two main consultation papers. One is on the change program, and the other one is on strategy. The change program, fundamentally, the big difference is that when I looked at AHDB, it was an organization where the levy had been pretty static, in fact, very static for 12 and a half years. And the whole organization, including its relationship with levy payers, was based around the spending of that money, that levy, and priorities in how that should be spent. Rather than in your businesses or in my old businesses, it would have been about trying to determine what is necessary, programs necessary, the real costs, and moving from there into how to generate the revenue to be able to pay for it. So the first thing we've introduced is that we will be starting to actually work on the basis of zero budgeting. So what we intend to do is the sector boards will be looking at what programs are wanted, needed, what they will cost. We will be absolutely transparent about costs. I think that there has always been this issue about AHDB not being open about its costs. I'm not sure it's deliberate, but we've got to be much more transparent about costs. They've got to be interrogated by the sectors and sector boards, and that will immediately take us at the end to the determination of what the levy should be for a period, let's say for 3 years or 5 years, and that would be in negotiation with the sector board with levy payers. So the responsibility and authority goes far more down to levy payers and sector boards and interaction. And we're actually just about to launch that redesigning of that level of activity so that we get better levy payer engagement, better engagement in the fixing of programs, the setting of budgets. And there's some good examples around the world which are done better than ours, like Australia and in some respects New Zealand. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we are creating a board that is more fit for purpose. So if we take the current board, only 2 members of the board are actually levy payers, and that is wrong. So we have told ministers who appoint all the board, because we are a statutory body, that we want to move to a situation where we have 1 independent chairman, we have 5 members of the board who are levy payers with actually current experience and involvement in the growing of the crops for which we are responsible, and 5 levy payers who are skill-based, and at the moment that would include environment and data. And then we're looking at the collection of levies, and I don't want to go into that here and now because each one is going to be quite different, and I'm sure Alison will talk a bit about potato levy collection. And importantly, not just will we have the current situation where if 5% of levy payers request a ballot, we have to have a ballot, which is a yes-no ballot. But we are moving to a situation where we're going to introduce 5-year regular ballots where all levy payers will have a chance to vote yes and no, but also to look at the work we've done and to publicly inform whether they think it's been good, well done or not well done. So that's some of the changes that we're introducing. They're all being driven by better levy payer engagement, but also about reducing costs. And we've got a whole lot of cost reduction programs, which we'll start announcing in February, April, as we come towards the setting of the budgets for this coming year. In terms of strategy, 3 main areas, and this is right across the board. So not every sector will buy into all of it. Not every part of every sector will buy into it, but evidence very much at the center. There's a plethora of evidence and data out there, and we're absolutely committed to making sure that data is available for farmers to really understand what is going on. So we're saying that everything has got to be evidence-based. And we can talk about that as well when we talk about lots of issues around potatoes. Flying the flag. For some people that's important. I can tell you for some sectors they don't see it being necessary. But both at home market and in export markets, we will continue to build on the reputation of British produce and particularly building exports in markets that actually require that, such as the sheep market and the pork market and seed potatoes as well. And then back to performance profitability and costs right at the heart of the future. And it's got to be an increasing recognition that with environmental controls and the issues around increasing costs around producing agricultural products. We've actually got to help farmers address some of those issues. So that's overall strategy. But more importantly, I think if we move on to potatoes, now that you've got a view of where the change program is, if we now look at potatoes, maybe Alison, you'd like to pick it up from there.
Thank you, Nicholas, and good afternoon, everybody. So I'm conscious that I'm probably a new face to most of you. So just to give you a little introduction, I joined the Potato Sector Board back in April 2019. I came as an independent member with a kind of marketing and more commercial remit based on my career, which has been in the food and drink industry. Perhaps worth mentioning here that I was marketing director at Coleman's of Norwich, for example, and then I went on, I was managing director at Campbell's Grocery Products, where we purchased huge amounts of potatoes and vegetables from the surrounding fens to go into our factory in King's Lynn. I became interim chair last July, and that's certainly been a bit of a baptism of fire. And although I'm not clearly from the potato industry, I'd like to think that I'm bringing a fresh pair of eyes and listening very hard and keen to address frustrations expressed by levy payers. So on now, just to sort of really a recap on the potato sector strategy, because you may have seen this through other town hall meetings. Sort of looking first top right hand corner, you know, I'm hearing increasingly about the challenges that potato growers or the potato industry is facing. And one of those, which is absolutely certain, is the continuing disappearance of actives, and we need to do work to find alternatives, which brings me across then to the two left-hand bullets. So the first plank of the potato strategy is around increasing investment in a broader research program from seed right the way through to storage. Now, we do have a very big project on storage in the wings, but because of the ballot, we're not going to be able to progress with announcing that until the outcome of the ballot is known, for pretty obvious reasons that we wouldn't be able to make any commitments until that ballot outcome is published. And then the second kind of really key area for the strategy is around crop protection, and in particular, giving growers much better access to the research and the results that we generate on their behalf. And then across to the bottom right-hand corner, talking about marketing, we see it as a priority that potatoes remain relevant to consumers. And I've got a couple of charts coming up to talk about that in a moment. So I'll come back to the marketing campaigns and the marketing work we've been doing. So Jimmy, if we could move on then to the next slide. So as Nicholas was saying, one of the themes and the frustrations coming from the request for views was around the area of cost, a feeling that there wasn't enough transparency and not good enough value for money. So we thought it would be useful if we shared with you today a summary of where the money has gone that's been spent over the course of the last year. So you can see top right-hand corner, 28% going on research, and then bottom right-hand corner, 17% going on knowledge exchange, which is really the key mechanism of how we get the learnings from the research out to the industry and in particular out to growers. If you look then across on the bottom left-hand corner, you can see a range of marketing activities from communications, events, exports, and market development, which is the marketing campaigns themselves. And that adds up to about 27%. I then did want to highlight the 9% that goes in generating market intelligence and analysis. And I know that this comes in for challenge from time to time. But what I don't see are any other organizations that are providing industry-wide reports and information on things like area planted, on harvesting, on storage, and on market data. And speaking as somebody with a marketing background, without that kind of data, I feel the industry would be flying blind. But let me come to the elephant in the room, which is the 19% that's going on support costs. Now, first thing to say is that this percentage is probably somewhat overstated, because under scrutiny, we've realized that some of the costs in there should really be reallocated into those other parts of the wheel, because they are specifically to do with delivering potato-oriented activity. But there is a big chunk of cost in there associated with things like finance, information systems, legal, procurement, facilities, and so on. This figure overall at 19% is clearly much too high. Quite where it should come down to, I don't know, but it's been a source of frustration
Thank you very much, Alison. Right, I'm going to keep my introduction short. Looking at the registrations, I think I know all of you, actually. One thing you perhaps don't know about me, though, is I started my career late 90s, mid-90s. My very first paid role in potatoes was to do some metalaxyl resistance testing for blight. And to put pins in a map, and that map was photographed and put into Farmers Weekly. Okay, I want you to hold that thought because I'm going to come back to why that's important in a minute. Now, you've got a slide here that it just scopes out where we are in terms of the expenditure, both on the crop protection issues and on the storage issue, and in particular that response to the demise of CIPC. Now, if I had an hour, I could go through each of these in quite some detail, but I haven't got that hour, so I'm just going to pick out one case study that sort of illustrates it's that existential question about why are we here and what are the services we're providing for industry. So if we go into this next slide, this is why I asked you to hold that thought about blight. This is where we've got to. Okay. This is the story of fluazinam that some of you will know, but some of you might not realize a lot of this goes on in the background. What this is built on is us having the network nationally, the blight scouts that we work with, the agronomists and the advisors and the fields people from different businesses. We've also got the genotyping work that we fund through the Hutton Institute, and on top of that, we also fund the fungicide resistance screening that goes on as well. And I think that the beauty of that sort of system is we're able, a little bit like coronavirus is now, is we're able to track, anticipate, and respond to the changing strains as they come up through mainland Europe into Kent and into the rest of the country. So what you've got in the green dots at the bottom here is the story of what happened to fluazinam, and it's because of that rapid response we were able to put in at the back end of 2017 that we were able to work with the advisory community and the agronomists and make sure we were getting robust programs out there for industry to use there on in. The flip side of that, and this is where we get to that sort of ballot related question of should we exist or not, if you'd have continued as an industry with that 2016 trajectory and done nothing at all, you would have had 3/4 of the national crop at high risk from blight infection. You would have been applying chemistry that simply wasn't going to work. Okay, so that's the type of, that's just one illustration of many case studies I could have delivered that you need to ask yourselves, is this the sort of service I want to see continue? Now, some of you will know this already, but the reason for flagging it again is when you sit there as a farm business, often all you ever see is a ticket that gets handed from the agronomist to the spray operator, and it ends up in the assurance file. Okay, what you need to appreciate here is there's an awful lot going on behind the scenes that protects the industry and stops those crises emerging. Okay, so that was just the one example. So Jimmy, if you want to go on to the next slide. Yeah, I've spun out one case study. I think if you haven't bought into it, then I've lost you already. But if you have, stick with it, because there are examples of how we do this. It's not just blight. We've done the same around decayer. We've done the same around blackleg population dynamics. We've done the same around PCN and speciation. We've done the same with the yellow water traps that's linked to the insecticide resistance as well. So I think that's the sort of stuff that's up for grabs and is up for debate. So I've given you one case study. There are lots and lots of examples. I can pick up one-to-one with any of you, and I could talk you through each of these in quite a lot of detail. All right, Jimmy, so if we go on to the next one, I think we're getting to the point where we're coming to the end of the slides. Okay, so this is just really just drive the message home. This is about a vote, and it is a very simple vote, and I'm sure Nicholas will give you chapter and verse on the difference between yes and no. I've got a very simple version of it here. Yes is that opportunity to work with us and help us evolve as a business and as a support mechanism for the potato industry. A no vote, that blight case study stops instantly, as do all the other examples that I could have given you. It's there for you to read. There's quite a lot at stake here. So I think I can pause there.
Thanks, Rob. Right, so we are into the questions and answers now. We've got some questions coming in the right-hand side in the chat bar. Keep submitting those. We'll get to as many as possible, and we've had some pre-submitted. I'll cover one myself now for a change. Just from Mark, have the ballot papers gone out to levy payers? Mark, the independent company running the ballot, UK Engage, did let us know that they posted all the papers on Monday. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to, whilst we go to the next question, I'm going to drop in a link to our website that's got the contact details for UK Engage. So if anyone hasn't received their papers, they can contact UK Engage and ask for a second copy. And there's also contact details for the person at AHDB who's dealing with it if you don't get anywhere with that. So then we can go on to our second question, which is from Paul Coleman. In 2014, the then chairman, Peter Kendall, said that the bottom line is we've got to feel, look and behave like one organisation if we're going to deliver as UK Centre of Excellence for Agriculture. Does AHDB believe they have a Centre of Excellence in the potato sector? I think there's two elements to that question. There's the one on potatoes and the one on the one AHDB Centre of Excellence. So Rob and Nicholas, I can come to you both here. Rob, do you want to kick off on potatoes, and then perhaps Nicholas could come in on AHDB as a whole?
Yeah. Okay. Okay, thank you, Paul. That's a good question. Look, I can answer you based on feedback and what we get from the survey work from levy payers, but also from our peers, because I think evidence is quite important in this. I think, as Alison has pointed out, we publish a figure on what levy payers think of us every year. It's not brilliant when it comes to value. Have to concede that, but when we dig into the figures we get around the spot farms, we know that it's high 80s and 90s of visitors going back and implementing change in their businesses. We get the same around our MI surveys when we ask for feedback on the quality of that sort of information, and we ask similar questions around the advisory stuff we do. The feedback's really, really good. International peers. I'll just throw this one in. We got a message from Chris Claridge at Potatoes New Zealand this morning, wishing us luck with the ballot and actually saying we should be proud of ourselves. We are world class. I want to throw that in, not as a brag, but there's a cohort of the industry saying we should be looking much more closely at the New Zealand and the Australia models as part of how we evolve. If you go to New Zealand, that's the message you're going to get. So we are held in high regard, which I think is part of that excellence equation. I think on the one AHDB bit, I think Nicholas, you're better placed to come in on that one.
Sure, thanks, Rob. Look, I'm permanently dissatisfied with everything. I'm a miserable so-and-so, and I have to say to you that I think there's enormous opportunity to improve AHDB, and it would be deeply disappointing if I didn't feel that. I do think, however, and that goes back to what I said before, that I think levy payer engagement's not great. I think that value will be enormously improved. I think we can take very large chunks out, and that goes to the new structure. It goes to the way we operate. It goes to taking out some of the bureaucracy. Is that a criticism of the past? I suppose it may be. But at the same time, I think we're all facing challenging times, and we've got to sharpen the pencil. So I think there are things I can criticize. On the good side, there aren't too many organizations that are getting 1,000 people turning up on webinars. And many across the whole of HDB, we're seeing between live webinars post-COVID-19 and catch up, we're seeing typically genuinely 1,000 people. And that's quite a fantastic achievement. I think the quality of the staff in most instances extremely high. I think our reputation generally, and I understand the ballot issue, but our reputation is high. And so, for example, before I took on this post, I was very close to the Americans, USDA. Rob talked about New Zealand, and when I said I was going to take on this post, the key people at USDA said it's a fantastic organization. It's not understood and people don't talk about it enough, but it's a fantastic organization. So I think genuinely I'd say, yes, it is a center of excellence. It's got room to improve. I think the people are super, I really do. I think that we've got really committed staff, but we've got a long way to go. So long answer, yes, I think we are a center of excellence, but I think there's more we can do and we've got to do.
Thanks very much, Nicholas. Okay, we'll get straight into the questions because we've got them coming in thick and fast. We'll go to Andy Clarkson now. With the outcome of the vote in the horti sector last week being announced, how will this impact plans that you have for the potato sector? And this is around cost management. Is this likely to drive more costs into central costs?
I'll pick that one.
Yeah, pick that one up. My children just get home.
Yeah, I'll pick it up. There's no children here. Yeah, look, I think, Andy, taking the point, if the ministers decide that our activities with horticulture cease, then clearly there are enormous costs to be taken out of the organisation. Horticulture is something like 10% of the activities of HDB. In fact, probably 10% of the cost, more than 10% of the cost for 10% of the revenue. And I say that in general terms because horticulture is 250 plus crops. It's complicated, and so a lot of people involved. But sure, if horticulture say that they don't want to be involved in HDB, and ministers confirm that, if potatoes vote no and confirm that, then we are talking about another 10% of HDB. So 20% of HDB would disappear. And I am quite happy to commit here and now that if horticulture comes out, then more than 10% of our costs will come out. And if potatoes comes out, more than 20% of our costs will come out, because we've already got lined up cost reduction without no votes. So I'm quite relaxed in the sense I can say to you, Andy, that for sure, whatever happens, there will not be a bigger burden, there'll be a lower burden, because that's all in process. But I would hate to see, in the end, parts of horticulture and agriculture not being part of HDB. But we'll have to wait and see.
Let's costs whilst we're on it. There's been another question from Paul Coleman asking, in 2015, the levy boards amalgamated. One of the benefits was synergistic backroom staff savings. What were the staff and running costs as a percentage of the levy in 2015 at the point of the merger? And what are the staff and running costs as a percentage of the levy now? were the savings measured and achieved?
Okay, so let me come in on that one. And what I would say is that there isn't a direct comparison, unfortunately. Well, fortunately. When the merger took place, a lot of the work that was done was third-party work, so it contracted a lot of work out. Today, a lot of the work is done in-house, and I think done to a very high standard. So, for example, all the marketing work under the PMB and others were contracted out. Today, it's all in-house, and it's done to an extremely high standard and very much to time. So there isn't a direct comparison. I think much more pertinent for me, looking at this as far as Paul's concerned, is do we actually have real savings because we have brought all the levy boards together over the last 12 years? I'd say not enough savings. I think that there are too many silos of activity, and that is all well in train to change. And I've said I've been here 9 months, and everybody on the staff, on the head office staff, has been engaged in looking at cost reduction, which will come through for next year. So you are right, Paul. We are not as focused as we should have been in terms of maybe driving the real benefits of bringing all these organisations together. But I have to say it is complex because there is still a great difficulty in getting each of the silos to work together and to take costs out. So there's a lot of work to be done, not just by us, but also by sector boards, also by levy payers. And we're engaged on it. So yeah, come back in a year's time, Paul, and I'll answer that question positively.
Nicholas, isn't it also worth just adding in here that, clearly there are lessons to be learned from the past, but also we should be looking more broadly and looking at some benchmarks of other organisations with maybe similar challenges around complexity and so on. So kind of trying to get more future focused as well.
Yeah, I think that's right. And actually on the work we've done on that so far, we don't actually see we're much out of line. I mean, quite interestingly, if we look at levies around the world, levy payments around the world, and if you looked at the Farmers Guardian last week, you would have seen some of that. We compare quite well with levies raised in New Zealand, Australia, America, and in Europe. So it's not as if we are raising high levies. And our overheads, if you tease out the point you made at the beginning about that 19%, Alison, about some of that being potato related, and therefore we have to tease that out. When you actually look at the real overheads, they're not desperately wrong. However, I would still argue there are several £1 million to be taken out of the whole organisation, whatever happens in terms of horticultural ballot.
Moving on, we've had this question from Bill Kwan and also from John Bradley. This ballot is based on one grower, one vote, as per the statute. Nicholas, are you going to publish the results with the weighted out turn to compare?
Yeah, can I just deal with that? Because there's a lot of disinformation and concern about this. The statute requires us to run a ballot on one levy payer, one vote. And that's what it is. That's what it is. No question about that. We did it using UK Engage, as we have to use an independent outside consultancy. The question as to why we published, and remember, 61% in horticulture voted out, 61% across the board. So the vote said no, we don't want to carry on. We were asked, UK Engage were asked by DEFRA to provide much more granular information, and that included the amount of votes by value, and also the breakdown by crop. So we published, as we should do, the fact that actually when 61% voted no by number, 57% voted yes by value. We also showed the enormous differences between crops. Now, that wasn't because we were trying to confuse or obfuscate. It was because that was the information that was requested by DEFRA so that ministers can look at it when they make their decision. So I don't want anybody to think that we're trying to be devious about this. All we're doing is publishing information. We are not, and I mean absolutely we are not, seeking to influence and make sure that ministers decide one way or the other. That's not our role. We're not allowed to do that.
Thank you very much. We've got a couple of questions on Sutton Bridge. So this is again one from John Bradley and also from Paul Coleman. John's asking, are we looking to sell Sutton Bridge? He's also asked if Adrian's on gardening leave. That's another one I can answer because I was in a meeting with Adrian yesterday. But read out Paul's question in detail. Given that Sutton Bridge has been the jewel in the crown of applied potato storage research in the UK, what is now the plan with the facility. Alison, did you want to come in on that one?
Yes, I will. I mean, clearly from the tone of those questions, there's a awareness that some time ago now we announced a procurement exercise to look into how we should deliver potato storage in the future, with a view to partnering with a third-party organisation. Because we're a public body, that there are very strict rules around how we conduct ourselves through that kind of process, which is why we've not been able to, share more information about it, and I can't today. What I can say with regard to Sutton Bridge is its future is not yet determined. So you shouldn't jump to any conclusions around what is actually going to happen to it. I think our absolute priority, well, I know our absolute priority is to ensure that we are able to provide potato scientists and the right facilities going forward to be able to meet the future challenges around potato storage. And that is our vision, that's our intent with this big project. And of course, it is frustrating that the ballot process has kind of jumped in the way a bit, but we sincerely hope that we'll obviously get a yes vote, and then we can get out there with some very exciting plans and a very exciting vision for how we see potato storage in the future.
Thank you, Alison.
Jimmy, can I come in on this as a potato, having been deeply invested in potato storage, and Alison asked me to have a look through some of that stuff as well, and I confirm as a lawyer as well, unfortunately, that we can't share it with you. It's just one of those unfortunate situations. But I think that the project that is being looked at and being tendered it's from seed to storage. It's one of the most, I think, one of the most cutting edge programs that I've seen around the world in terms of the opportunity to bring the whole chain together in terms of storage. I think it's really exciting, and I think, I'm sorry, you'll just have to wait till after the ballot to know what the results are.
You want to come in on that one?
I do. Well, not necessarily on that one, but I want to answer John's question in a slightly different way, and just say something about Adrian. He's like a caged tiger at the moment, as we all are. We can't get out and about and do all the things we want to do. He is taking bookings for the storage network at the moment. And this is the one-to-one visit schedule we've got so that we can really get under the skin of what's happening in individual stores. We'll get the details of that around to everybody on this call. The minute he's allowed out of lockdown, you'll be following a trail of dust, put it that way. Because
he'll be working so hard.
Absolutely.
Okay, right. We've actually got a couple of people who want to come up on the stage here. So let's see. Our old friend Tim Papworth, who's been up here before. Tim, I think you should be on your way now, Tim, are you? Here he comes. Hi, Tim, go for it.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for that. My question has actually already been answered by Nicholas very well when before I could get on to ask it about altering the statistics to suit yourselves, and it's frustrating because it goes back to the time when I was a board member and there's this hand from above guiding which way you can go, and it's all about a DEFRA, and you've answered it very well, and I find it frustrating that it has to be like that, to be honest with you, and not really fair, but I understand what's going on. Thank you for your answer.
We've also got Mike Dagg, who wants to come up on the stage. What I might do is I'm going to request that you come up here in a second, Mike. But whilst I do that, I'm also going to ask another pre-submitted question to keep us moving. This one came in from Jeffrey Mayhew, and I'm going to go to Alison on it because it's right up your street. Do you feel washing fresh produce creates food elitism through unnecessary attention to cosmetic appearance when a dry brush product has better shelf life, reduces food waste for the consumer? So I'll go to you, Alison, and I'll also get Mike up here.
Well, thank you for that. I think it's a very, very good question. I don't know that we've specifically got the answer within our market research as to what consumers think about washed potatoes, but what I do know is the greatest proportion of potatoes sold out of supermarkets, for example, are washed. And we do know that convenience is a very important factor with regard to all foodstuff and potatoes in particular, and that generally consumers are highly influenced by what they see with their eyes, although there is some evidence, I think, that that's starting to change. So you get wonky veg and stuff like that. However, what we are picking up is that increasingly consumers are concerned to have not only a healthy diet or delicious diet or whatever, but also one that is sustainable, and they're more interested in the the environmental factors associated with the production of their food. So this could well fall into that camp. And I think it's something that we need to look at in the future around getting campaigns out there to talk about the positive environmental credentials that potatoes have, and making consumers more aware about the benefits versus other carbohydrates, for example, and things that they could do, like buying dry brushed potatoes rather than washed ones. But I think that's probably a bit further down the line.
Thanks, Alison. Mike's not appeared, so Mike, if you do want to come up, you should have something from me you can accept, but we'll keep moving. We've got a question here from Paul Arden. Is there a suggestion to vary the levy cost between departments within potatoes, or the reference between sectors? We do have some proposals on levy. Alison, can you pick that one up?
I just missed that last bit of your question. You're saying to talk about the levy?
Yeah, is there a suggestion to vary the levy cost between departments within potatoes or between sectors?
Okay, if I understand kind of correctly here, I mean, obviously the potato levy that gets raised is spent and will get spent on potatoes. I mean, I think as far as possible, our overheads that go associated with that should also be proportionate to potatoes and the services that we receive, if you like, from the central part of AHDB. But it also goes back to what Nicholas was talking about at the beginning with zero-based budgeting and levy payers being more in the driving seat to determine what programs of work they want to have done, and to know and understand what the costs associated with those will be. So if it was a question more generally around proposals of how we will in the future raise the levy for potatoes, we debated this back in an open board meeting last July, and having done a major review, it came back full circle to recommend that we should carry on with area planted, but introduce a clawback mechanism for crop that is unsold, also to remove the immediate 10% penalty if you are a day late paying, and also to remove the criminality clause that's in there. One we've never ever implemented, but therefore let's take it out, all subject to DEFRA, and we're still very much in consultation around that.
Jimmy, can I sorry, just as an aside, I noticed Bill Kwan's question, which doesn't quite relate to, but it does relate to the per acre, and I just wanted to make sure everybody does understand that. That's the is the ballot one person, one vote, or related to levy acres, right? It is one potato business, one vote. It is purely, simply a levy payer who gets the vote, and only one person within that levy paying vote gets the vote. So you have to decide, if you're a partnership, who's going to get the vote.
Okay, we've got questions coming in thick and fast. Let's go to Andrew Francis's question. Andrew has picked up on the news that the emergency approval application we made for Vido was not successful. And he's asking, with a view to future strategy engagement with legislators, what have we learned from that? Rob, is that one for you? Or
yeah, no, I can start off, but I will, when I get to the end of where I've gone, I'll invite Nicholas to say something about relationships within government, because I think that's an important part of how we answer this. Right, so what we know, Andrew, we know from a pesticide risk register that we keep ourselves approximately when pesticides come up for review, and what the likelihood of them surviving a review is, based on a whole host of criteria, whether it's the endocrine thing or the carcinogen thing, or whatever it is. It would be fair to say that process has become quite congested around CRD and that interaction with CRD. We know there is a phenomenal backlog of cases to be heard and addressed. We saw exactly the same when we tried to push the DMN case through and we're anticipating it will be slow progress from here on in. The key lesson I think we're learning at the moment, Andrew, is that there is an open consultation at the moment. It's about the future strategy for pesticides in GB, and it's about, in a nutshell, how CRD operates and how we want them to operate in the future. I think we've learned immediately that we need to pile into that. We've been having conversations around all the stakeholder network about what the opportunities are to influence some of those processes going forwards. We'll carry on with the risk register work that we're doing. We'll carry on with the sort of critical timings around pesticides. But I think the key thing is how we get that relationship with CRD motoring. And that's probably a good point to invite Nicholas just to say a bit more about the DEFRA and ministerial interactions around pesticides.
Look, we've left Europe. We've left Europe to reduce to give us more freedom to operate. And I think it'd be fair to say that we start off, I'll take DMN as an example. We start off with a situation where we couldn't get permission to use DMN, and yet it's used in some parts of the continent like Holland and Germany. So interesting case study where it took us straight into, people say, do we lobby? And I say we're not a lobbying organisation. That's what the NFU does, etc. But we are evidence-based, and we do actually bring significant influence to the table. So take DMN as an example. I talked to ministers. I talked to the head of health and safety, which CRD comes under. I spoke to the CRD team, and where we are is we are clearly learning together how we should learn to operate much more collectively, rather than have a bureaucracy where CRD behaves as if it is a repetition of what came out of Brussels. So I think that Rob is right. I think we are on a journey, and I think we will get much more engagement with CRD. But let nobody misunderstand. However much we may be able to get minor crop usage or be able to get emergency usage or be able to hold back the flood on certain things, there is an inexorable move towards the reduction in chemicals in every sense, and we have to invest. We have to invest R&D and best practice in a world that's going to mean that we're going to get less and less chemicals, however much we have a relationship with CRD on emergency usage, etc. So I think that there are enormous challenges coming around sustainability, and this is just one of them. So we have to be proactive, we have to be evidence-based, and we have to be in there with DEFRA, with health and safety, with CRD, and I think we are.
Okay, question here on 5 a day, and then there's also another one on relationship with retailers. So Alison, I'll come to you on both. Let's do 5 a day first. Is it fair to say AHDB has failed growers by not getting potatoes established as one of your 5 a day?
Well, I know that the fact that potatoes aren't one of the 5 a day it is an unhappy situation for a lot of people in the potato industry. But the other view around this is it allows potatoes to be seen much more as centre of the plate, and in the context of more flexitarian eating habits and dietary habits and so on. I don't think it's necessarily a bad place to be.
Rob, do you want to come in? So you're moving.
Well, just to give everyone a bit of history so that we all understand what we're talking about. This was another not lobbying occasion. David Walker and myself, some years ago, we went to meet Anna Soubry when she was Secretary of State for Health, and it was what she said was, yes, you can apply to be part 5 a day. You will need the full intervention studies that any other product has to go through to get in, and you'll need to pay for them yourselves. And we totted it up, and it was an intervention study starts when you're quite young and goes into adulthood. So it's a 20-year journey if we wanted to do it. And we talked to the stakeholders at the time about whether we should embark on that, and it was just seen as the more cumbersome of the different alternatives we had. But I think, as Alison says, if you look at the balanced plate now, you've got potatoes at 12 o'clock on that plate, which I think is as good as we're going to get.
Okay, thanks both. Mike Dagg here. Would it not be better for some hard-speaking growers and no-nonsense AHDB persons to go and tackle the retailers on loads of issues that growers go through risk versus reward? Any views on that one?
Well, I mean, I had a number of conversations with levy payers recently, feeling that they're very much at the sort of bottom of the pile and under huge price pressure or downward price pressure from retailers and so on. And coming from working in the food and drink industry, I'm well experienced in dealing with the big supermarkets, and I know it feels like, well, it is a very, very tough place. I think what we can do here is, as Nicholas was talking about, is to provide the evidence and help understand what's happening to the industry from a benchmarking point of view, from a cost point of view, and so on, and help set out the case. So I'm not so sure about the strategy of hard speaking growers and no nonsense AHDB persons, but I think speaking with data is probably, rather than too much emotion, is the best way to go with the supermarkets.
I mean, on the data front, we do have our farm bench system, and I know Claire, David and Amber are all working with growers on that. So if any of you guys do want to contribute, let me know, but we'll keep going because there's a lot of questions. And just to say at this point, because we've got 10 minutes to go, please keep your questions coming in. If we don't get to any that are in the chat, we will pick up with you after the meeting. So we've got a question here from Alan Stevenson. What consideration has been given to the split of levy income paid by growers versus packers and processors? In the past, there was discontent for growers who paid 80% of the total, and yet were mostly price takers from the 20% who made most of the supply chain profits. Maybe a better balance is required going forward. Any view on that from the panel?
I can add an initial comment here, and then maybe Nicholas would want to say more. I mean, we have about it, or we have sort of appreciated that there's this big disparity. There's not something that we're proposing at this stage of reviewing the levy, but it's perhaps something we could get into dialogue about in the future. So it's not gone unnoticed. I don't know whether you want to say more, Nicholas.
Yeah, what I want to say, it's not just potatoes. It goes into other areas as well. And for example, if you take the red meat area, it's the same thing between the levy paid by the abattoirs and the producers. And I think that what I was trying to convey when we were talking about the big changes at AHDB is that the move towards better levy payer engagement, and when I mean engagement, I mean involvement of levy payers. All these subjects are up for discussion, and that includes what is our role. Very interesting. I had a conversation this morning with DEFRA about our role as a public authority, and the fact that we need to move to become much more hybrid so that we can do some of the things that some of these questions are about. So should we be in there talking to retailers about margins? I think we should. I think at the moment we don't have it as a remit, and it's part of being a public body that we don't. Should we be lobbying? Well, it depends what you mean by lobbying. We should always be evidence-based on everything we do and be absolutely straight about that. That's our strength. But should we be more engaged in all of these issues? If the levy payers want us to be, I think we should be able to do that. So I think we're in for a very interesting time in looking at the way we operate. And I think that you'll see, I mean, you'll see clearly as we move forward that these things will be up for discussion. I think we're going into a period, quite rightly, where we are much more open to talk, to discuss, to be transparent with levy payers. And if there are strong problems and strong opportunities, we have to discuss them out.
This might be another one in that bracket, Nicholas. It's from James Aiken. Do you believe, as the pressure to reduce dependence on pesticides takes hold, we can expect to see some loosening on the benefits to be gained from gene editing?
Well, I can tell you very clearly that that government is signalling that we're going to move towards some sort of loosening on gene editing, not necessarily genetic modification, but gene editing, and the difference is being pulled out quite well. I think that, and I think that Scotland will probably not. So I think that there'll be an interesting issue there coming up. But I think that the one thing I would say is that we have yet to bottom the true acceptance of the difference, not just scientific acceptance, but consumer difference between gene editing and genetic modification. And I think that's going to be a very important debate that does take place. The one thing I would say, of course, is that one of the considerations is with Europe as large market for British agri-foods, and I don't mean for potatoes, but generally for agri-foods, then moving towards gene editing immediately takes you out of consideration for being able to get equivalence agreements and getting into Europe. And that includes Northern Ireland, and that includes Ireland. So there are all sorts of implications around it. But science is moving on very fast, and I would not be surprised if we didn't see gene editing coming into it. But that's a personal view.
Thank you, Nicholas. So we've got just over 5 minutes to go. So I'll make the same point on questions, keep them coming in. We've had one here from Walter Simon. Looking forward to net zero by 50/50, if not before, if you listen to the NFU. What messages are AHDB sending out to levy payers to help them navigate getting into this different future? Rob, that one for you.
But Jimmy, this might be a good time to get one or two of our KE colleagues just to come and fill in some of the blanks. But it's almost a two-stage process, Walter. So we've got the development of EnviroBench as a benchmarking tool that allows us to look at that sort of sustainability equation in the round, and that's something that we're developing so that you can use it across sectors and across commodities, so that you can do accurate comparisons. That's the first step. Is we've had just too many measuring systems out there. We've underpinned that already by doing all the baseline measures across all of the strategic farm network, not just the spot farms, but the ones you see in cereals, dairy, beef, etc., so that we've got a platform on which we can start. Then beyond that, it's, well, how do you get there? So it's all the things like cultivation determinacy, water resources going forwards, rotation management, and then pretty much wherever there's an input, whether it's electricity in your store or whether it's fertilizer on your fields, there is a job to do in terms of optimizing that input use. So whether you want to bring someone up, well, you could have two, couldn't you? You could have a Scottish perspective and an English perspective, Jimmy. Let's just. I
won't make any comment, but we got both. We got Scottish David who works for us in the east of England.
Okay, no worries.
Hey Rob, am I not right in thinking it's Carbon Week at the start of March as well?
Oh crikey, that one's passed me by. I've got things on my mind, Alison.
It is Carbon Week, 1st to 5th of March. David or Claire, welcome.
Yeah, afternoon everyone. Yeah, I was just going to pick up on Rob's point about the benchmarking understanding. Obviously, he touched on the carbon audits that we're rolling out now, and there's several different tools out there. And the one thing I regularly get back from the grower base is people are a bit in two minds which way to turn, which is the best system, which is the optimum one. And that's one thing that we are doing across all sectors and all farms, is trying to find a standardized system that we can roll out across farms. Obviously, we're at that point reasonably comfortably with FarmBench looking at economics, where people can drill down, and the beauty is they can then compare with their peers, and peer-to-peer learning is far more effective and efficient than a researcher standing there telling you that in practice this should work, when in reality it may be different. I don't know if Claire's had different experiences.
I mean, with Bruce Farms, we definitely saw some big gains in sales year in reducing input costs. So you know, the wins were there. It's just kind of drilling in some of the detail that was quite exciting. And then obviously in this project that we've got, the seed farm with Jim Reid, he's just started on that carbon audit at the moment, and there's loads of tools that we've got in place to look at, and I think we're in a really powerful position to actually answer these questions. And you know, some will be wins. We're really testing the boundaries at the moment in what we can do. So I think potatoes are in a pretty strong position as long as we look at the whole rotation.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks, both. If you both stay with me, because we've got a good question here from David Hoyles, who says, often in life you get out what you put in. Many successful growers and organisations are utilising AHDB knowledge and info. On the Hort vote, it was mainly the smaller scale businesses who voted no. How would you get more growers engaged with AHDB in the future? Make sure they get value for money. So do either of you have a view on that from your spot farm work or anything else? And I'll also put the URL for Carbon Week in the chat for you, so you can have a look at our event.
I get to my wish list first. I mean, I love all the work that we get to do with farmers, so there's loads I could throw into this. I think the strategic farms have been brilliant. I just wish we could do them everywhere, but we're pretty agile in how we can put some of these tryouts on farm and work with farmers. So there's loads of scope of doing that to get into some of this small, with the seed. I know we're in a WARE session, but with the seed industry, we've got guys in the Black Isle. We also link with the monitor farms on the cereal side, and that brings us into benchmarking and gets us a different audience. And I find that really useful to get in front of some of our smaller growers, because it's really important to me that they get value out of what I'm doing and working with other farmers. So yeah, the monitor farms allows us to get a bit of more network, because as I say, it's across the whole cycle of what the land's used for, not just potatoes as well, where we need to see about groundkeepers. We're talking about looking after the soil with compaction and things. So there's loads that we can do, and it's just it's us getting out on the ground and pushing as hard as we can to speak to as many people.
Yeah, I echo Claire's comments completely. And another thing I think as an organisation we need to be braver at doing is actually shouting and claiming the work we are doing. Historically, we've had the approach that as long as the information disseminated out, we're not too concerned how this happens. And that's possibly become our detriment, that people don't necessarily realise they are utilising the tools and information we're providing. So I think, yeah, we need to really shout loudly about what we are doing. Because a lot of people, I know we discussed that they'll send their agronomist to a spot farm, so they are up to date with the latest technology, and then they get it secondhand. They're still getting the information. They just don't perhaps realise it's originated from our work. So I think, yeah, we're going to fly the flag for AHDB, the work we're doing and the stuff we have planned.
Thank you guys. So we've come to time now. So what I'll do is I'll share the URL that I shared at the beginning of the session, and that has got our Meet the Team link on it, and that gives anybody a chance to contact their local knowledge exchange manager for help get involved with our work, as David and Claire have just said, or if you'd like us to come to any meetings during this ballot period, we're very happy to do that. Nicholas, Rob, Alison, or any of our regional teams are happy to come and meet you and take any questions. I'll also say that the questions came in thick and fast this time, which is brilliant. I hope I got to all of them, but we will go back through just to make sure they were all covered, and we will get in touch for anyone who we didn't get to. So finally, thank you to the panel. Thank you, Rob, Nicholas and Alison, and everyone who attended, and I hope to see you again soon.
See you all.